I never planned on working for someone like him. My life was already a constant balance between lectures, part-time jobs, and the never-ending fear of losing my scholarship. One mistake, one bad grade, and I'd be out on the streets. That's why, when the university's career office mentioned a special opportunity to work as an assistant for the heir of one of the wealthiest families in Korea, I almost laughed. Working for someone born with everything I've spent my life crawling after? But the pay was double what my cafe shifts gave me. Rent, food, tuition. Suddenly the numbers didn't feel so impossible. So I signed the contract, thinking it would just be errands, emails, schedules. Nothing I couldn't handle. That was before I met him. Yoonha. The name alone carried weight. Everyone at the university knew who he was, even if he never lowered himself to speak to us. His family's empire stretched across hotels, banks, and entire blocks of Seoul. He moved through campus like a ghost, always surrounded by people, yet untouchable. No one dared step in his path. No one even looked him in the eye for too long. So, of course, I had to be the exception. The first time I entered his private office on campus, I understood why people described him as cold. He sat behind a sleek black desk, perfectly tailored suit draping his tall frame, silver watch glinting under the soft light. His posture was sharp, his face unreadable, and his gaze. God, his gaze could cut flesh. "You're late," he said without looking up from the document in his hands. His voice was smooth, low, but it carried a chill that made the air conditioner seem unnecessary. I checked my phone. "It's 9 o'clock sharp." "You said 9. That made him glance up. For a moment, his eyes lingered on me as though surprised I dared to answer back. Most people, I guessed, would have bowed their head and apologized. But something in me refused to bend so easily. A faint smirk touched his lips, so quick I almost thought I imagined it, before it vanished. "Then stand there quietly. Don't speak unless I ask you to." I clenched my jaw but said nothing. That was our beginning. Days turned into weeks, and my duties stretched far beyond what I'd imagined. Sure, I handled his emails, took notes during meetings, kept his calendar organized, but I was also expected to follow him everywhere. Business dinners, private lectures, late-night study sessions. It was like being chained to his side, a shadow forced to keep up with a man who never slowed down. And Yoonha didn't make it easy. He ordered instead of asked. He watched instead of spoke. And whenever I showed the slightest trace of attitude, his eyes would glimmer with something I couldn't quite place. Amusement? Annoyance? Something darker? I tried to keep my head down, but sometimes my sharp tongue slipped. "Why do you need me to carry this when you have two perfectly good hands?" I muttered one evening after he dumped a stack of documents into my arms without warning. His head tilted slightly, that cold expression still fixed on his face. "Because I don't like wasting energy on things beneath me." I raised a brow. Must be exhausting, being so important all the time. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between us. Then, there it was again. That fleeting smirk. Almost like he enjoyed me pushing back. Most days, it felt like a silent battle. His cold authority versus my stubborn pride. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way he looked at me. Sometimes, when I was jotting down notes during a meeting, I'd feel his gaze burning into me. When I looked up, he'd already turned away, as if nothing happened. During car rides, I caught his reflection in the tinted window, eyes tracing over me before his smirk curled at the corner of his mouth. One night, while sorting through files in his penthouse study, I dropped a pen. When I bent down to pick it up, I felt him step closer. Close enough that the faint scent of expensive cologne brushed against my skin. My chest tightened. I straightened, clutching the pen, only to find him watching me with that same unreadable stare. "You're careless," he said softly. But his tone wasn't about the pen. I swallowed hard. "And you're too close." He didn't move back. Instead, his lips twitched, half amusement, half challenge. Then he finally stepped away, leaving me shaken, my heart pounding like I'd just run a race. The strangest thing was how everyone else reacted to him. Professors bowed, businessmen stuttered, even seasoned executives treated him like a king. But for some reason, he never intimidated me enough to shut me up completely. Maybe it was my survival instinct. Maybe it was sheer stupidity. But every time he tried to assert control, something in me wanted to push against it, to prove I wasn't just another servant. And every time I did, that damn smirk appeared. Like he was waiting for me to resist. Like he wanted me to. One evening, I arrived at his penthouse earlier than usual. The door was unlocked, the lights dim. I stepped inside carefully, calling his name, but there was no answer. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my skin. I moved toward the study, and that's when I heard it. A faint sound, almost like glass shattering. My pulse spiked. Pushing the door open, I froze. Yoonha was standing by the desk, his hand bleeding from a shattered tumbler on the floor. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and for once, his mask wasn't in place. His expression was raw, anger, frustration, something almost desperate. He looked up and caught me staring. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, voice low, "You shouldn't have come in. I should have apologized. I should have backed away." But instead, the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Even you bleed like the rest of us." His eyes narrowed, dangerous and sharp. But instead of lashing out, he let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Careful, Junseo. Keep talking like that, and I'll start to think you want to test how far I'll let you go." My throat went dry. There was something in his tone, something that promised more than just words. And then, that smirk appeared again. Slow, deliberate, hungry. I didn't know it then, but that was the night everything shifted. Because for the first time, I saw the crack in his cold exterior. And I realized he wasn't just toying with me. He was watching, waiting, planning. And I had just walked straight into his game. Working for Yoonha was supposed to be temporary. A few months, maybe a semester. Long enough to save money and secure my scholarship. That's what I told myself. But weeks slipped into months, and instead of fading into the background, I found myself being pulled deeper and deeper into his world. It started small. An extra errand after hours. A late-night call to pick up documents from his penthouse. A request to accompany him to a meeting in the city because, as he put it, I need someone competent to take notes. But it didn't stop there. Soon, I was riding in sleek black cars beside him, walking past velvet ropes into exclusive clubs and hotels, and standing silently behind him at tables where men twice my age bowed their heads to him like he was already the king of Korea. And every time I asked myself the same question, why me? He had dozens of employees at his beck and call. Assistants who would have gladly sold their souls to serve him. Yet he kept me close. Too close. The more time I spent around him, the harder it became to ignore how he blurred boundaries. One evening, before a business dinner, I handed him his tie. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting it with practiced ease, but then he paused and turned to me. "Fix it," he ordered, voice calm but firm. I frowned. "You know how to tie a tie better than I do. Do it anyway." His eyes pinned me in place, sharp and unyielding. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer, my fingers brushing the smooth fabric as I straightened the knot. That's when I realized how close we were, so close I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, smell the clean, crisp scent of his cologne. My hands trembled, just slightly, and his lips curved. That smirk. "You're shaking," he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. "I'm not," I snapped, pulling my hands back quickly. But I was. Another night, we were in his car after an event. I sat rigidly in the passenger seat while he scrolled through his phone. Suddenly, he leaned across me, reaching for the glove compartment. His shoulder brushed against mine, warm and firm, lingering a fraction longer than necessary. My chest tightened, heat crawling up my neck. I turned to glare at him, but he didn't move back. His face was inches from mine, his eyes glittering with something dangerous. "Problem?" he asked smoothly. "Just, you don't know what personal space is." He chuckled under his breath, low and amused. "Personal space is for strangers. And what am I to you?" He didn't answer. He just leaned back, smirk still playing at his lips, as if I'd walked straight into a trap. The more I tried to keep him at arm's length, the more he seemed to enjoy closing the distance. I told myself I wasn't affected, that I wouldn't fall into whatever game he was playing. But my body betrayed me. My heart beat too fast when his hand brushed against mine. My stomach tightened when I caught him watching me from across a room. It was maddening. And then came the night that changed everything. It was late, past midnight, when I went to his penthouse to drop off a file. He'd been working in the study, the glow of his desk lamp casting shadows across his sharp features. I placed the folder on the desk and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Stay. I froze. Slowly I looked back. He was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the armrest, his gaze fixed on me with unsettling intensity. I already delivered the file, I said carefully. My work is done. Not yet. There was no room for argument in his tone, yet I couldn't just obey without question. You really think you can order me around like a servant? That was when it happened. The cold mask he always wore slipped, just slightly. His smirk deepened, but behind it, his eyes burned with hunger. Real, unmasked hunger. He stood slowly, each step deliberate as he closed the distance between us. My body screamed at me to move, but my feet stayed rooted to the floor. When he stopped in front of me, his hand rose. Fingers brushed lightly against my jaw, tilting my face upward. The touch was almost gentle, but the control behind it was absolute. My breath hitched. You talk back to me more than anyone else, he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. But your body, it tells a different story. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. You're imagining things. Am I? His thumb grazed my lower lip, lingering just long enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. Heat spread through me, betraying the calm I tried to project. I should have pushed him away. I should have shouted, demanded boundaries. Instead, I stood frozen, trembling under his gaze. His smirk widened. Stay still, he whispered, leaning so close his breath ghosted over my ear, while I stretch you wider. The words sent a shiver racing down my spine. I jerked back, breaking free from his touch, my chest heaving. You're insane, I spat, my voice unsteady. But the damage was already done. My body betrayed me, the heat in my cheeks, the pounding of my heart, the way my knees felt weak. And he knew it. His eyes gleamed with triumph as he stepped back, giving me space but not release. Go on then, he said softly. Run if you can. But I didn't move. Not right away. Because a part of me, traitorous and reckless, wanted to stay. That night, when I finally stumbled out of his penthouse into the cool night air, my mind was a storm. Anger, fear, and something else I couldn't name swirled inside me. He was dangerous. I knew that. But the real danger wasn't Yoonha. It was me, because no matter how hard I tried to resist, I was starting to want the very thing I swore I'd never let happen. After that night in his penthouse, nothing went back to normal. I tried to convince myself it was just a moment of weakness, a game he played to throw me off balance. I told myself I could ignore it, keep my head down, and finish this job without falling any deeper into whatever trap he was setting. But Yoonha didn't allow distance. Every day, he pulled me closer, sometimes with sharp commands, other times with subtle, quiet gestures that made my chest tighten in ways I hated to admit. It was a constant push and pull, a dangerous dance where I tried to resist, but he always found a way to close the gap. One evening, we were in the study, going over his schedule. I leaned over the desk, pointing at a date on the planner. You can't double book these meetings. The times overlap. Then cancel the less important one, he replied smoothly. And which one is that? I pressed, narrowing my eyes. His lips curved into that smirk I'd come to despise, and secretly crave. Whichever one keeps me away from you longer. My heart skipped, but I refused to let him see it. I rolled my eyes. You really think the world revolves around you, don't you? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing over the back of my hand as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The touch was brief, but it sent heat racing up my arm. I jerked my hand back, glaring at him. Stop doing that. His smirk deepened. Doing what? You know what? Do I? His tone was low, teasing, and his eyes glimmered like he enjoyed watching me squirm. I hated how my pulse betrayed me. Our encounters only grew more intense from there. At an exclusive dinner, I stood behind him, silent as always, while powerful businessmen fawned over him. But when I shifted slightly, trying to step out of the way, his hand casually reached back, fingers grazing my wrist, holding me in place as though to remind me, stay. You belong here. No one else noticed, but I felt the silent claim burning against my skin. Another time, in the back seat of his car after a long day, I leaned my head against the window, exhausted. My eyes drifted shut, only to snap open when I felt something warm brush my hair. I turned to find his hand retreating, his expression unreadable. What was that? I demanded. Nothing, he said calmly. You looked tired. You don't get to touch me just because I work for you, I snapped. He didn't argue. He just smirked faintly and looked out the window, as if he'd already won. And maybe he had. Because each touch, each smirk, each unspoken word chipped away at my defenses. It wasn't just touches. It was control. One afternoon, I received an email from a professor offering me a research assistant position, something that could have boosted my academic career. I was thrilled, ready to accept, until the next day when the offer was mysteriously withdrawn. I later overheard one of Yoonha's men mentioning that the Heir didn't want me distracted with other commitments. My blood boiled. I confronted him in his penthouse, slamming the schedule book onto his desk. You interfered with my professor. He didn't even flinch. I told them your time belongs to me. You don't own me. I shouted. Don't I? His eyes locked onto mine, cold and sharp, but beneath the ice there was something fierce, almost desperate. You're mine, Junseo. Whether you admit it or not. My chest heaved, fury mixing with something hotter, darker. I wanted to scream, to curse him, to walk out and never look back. But when he stood, stepping around the desk until he towered over me, I didn't move. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, and despite everything, my body leaned into the touch. I hated myself for it. It wasn't always anger. Sometimes, it was something else entirely, something raw that made me question everything. One night, after a long business event, we returned to his penthouse. He loosened his tie, sinking into the leather sofa with a sigh. I'd never seen him look so tired, so human. I hesitated before asking, "Why do you push people away?" His eyes flicked to me, sharp as ever. "What makes you think I do?" "Because I've been here long enough to notice," I said softly. "No one really knows you. Not your employees, not those businessmen, not even the professors who worship you. You wear that mask all the time. Called Untouchable. But no one can live like that forever." For a moment, silence filled the room. I thought he'd shut me out like always. Instead, he let out a bitter laugh. "You think you know me, Junseo?" "I'm starting to," I admitted. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze burning into me. "Then you should run. Because if you stay, you'll see just how far I'm willing to go to keep you." The warning should have scared me. But all I could think was how lonely he looked in that moment. The push and pull continued, but something inside me was shifting. Every time he smirked, every time his hand lingered, every time he whispered something that blurred the line between threat and promise, I felt myself unraveling. Was I being broken by him? Or was I willingly letting myself fall? I didn't know anymore. One evening, while reviewing his schedule in the study, I felt his gaze burning into me again. I looked up, ready to snap at him, but the words died in my throat. His expression wasn't cold this time. It was something else. Something raw and vulnerable. "What is it?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He just smirked faintly, but it wasn't the usual mocking curl of his lips. It was softer, almost pained. "You're the only one who talks to me like this," he said finally. "The only one who looks at me and doesn't see the air, the name, the power." My chest tightened. For once, I didn't know what to say. He stood and stepped closer, close enough that his presence swallowed me whole. "That's why I can't let you go." I should have pushed him away. I should have reminded him of the line he kept crossing. But instead I stayed. Because maybe I didn't want to go. There's always a moment when tension snaps. For weeks, Yoonha and I had danced around it. The looks, the touches, the games of power and control. He pulled, I resisted. He smirked, I snapped. But underneath it all, something dangerous was building, pressure mounting until I knew it was only a matter of time before one of us broke. That night, the breaking point came. We just returned from another event, one of those endless banquets where men in suits bowed to him and whispered his name like it was a prayer. I'd stood at his side as usual, pretending not to notice how his hand occasionally brushed mine under the table, how his gaze lingered on me more than it should. By the time we got back to his penthouse, I was exhausted. All I wanted was to drop the files on his desk and leave. But as soon as the door shut behind us, I felt it, the shift in the air. Yoonha didn't move toward the study. He didn't loosen his tie or take off his jacket. Instead, he turned to me, eyes dark, smirk playing at his lips. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. I stiffened. "I've been doing my job." He stepped closer, each stride deliberate, his presence swallowing the space between us. "No. You've been running. Every time I reach for you, you pull away. Every time I test you, you hide behind that sharp tongue." My heart raced, but I lifted my chin. "Maybe because you keep crossing lines you shouldn't." He stopped right in front of me, his gaze boring into mine. "And maybe because you keep pretending you don't want me to." The air left my lungs in a rush. Before I could reply, his hand shot out, gripping my wrist, not roughly but firmly, enough to remind me how easily he could hold me in place. His other hand slid behind my neck, pulling me closer until I could feel his breath against my skin. "Stay still," he whispered, voice low and sharp, "while I stretch you wider than you've ever been." My chest tightened, heat flooding through me. Anger, fear, desire, they tangled together until I couldn't tell one from the other. "Let me go," I said, but the words lacked strength. "Say you don't want this," he murmured. "Say it and I'll stop." My lips parted but no sound came. Because deep down I couldn't say it. Not truthfully. He saw it, the hesitation, the betrayal of my own body. And his smirk widened, triumphant yet vulnerable at the same time, like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than I realized. That was when something inside me snapped, not with fear, but with defiance. I shoved him back, surprising us both. My chest heaved, my voice shaking but fierce. "You think you're the only one who can play this game? That I'm just going to break under you?" For the first time, his mask faltered. His eyes widened slightly, as though he hadn't expected me to push back. I stepped forward, closing the distance he'd lost, my hand grabbing his tie to yank him down to my level. "You're not the only one who wants control, Yoonha." His breath caught. Then, slowly, his lips curved, not the cold, mocking smirk I knew so well, but something raw, almost trembling at the edges. "You finally admit it," he whispered. I hated how much I wanted him. I hated how much he'd consumed me, twisted me, bound me tighter with every glance and touch. But more than that, I hated the thought of walking away. So I didn't. What followed wasn't a kiss, wasn't a confession. It was a clash, hands gripping, bodies colliding, every ounce of pent-up tension exploding between us. He tried to press me back, to assert dominance like always, but I met him head-on, refusing to bend. My pride screamed not to surrender, even as my body burned with need. His smirk returned, but it wasn't victorious, it was desperate, almost pleading, like he needed me to fight him, to prove I wouldn't just be another shadow at his side. The penthouse around us blurred. The only thing I saw, the only thing I felt, was him. His heat, his strength, his hunger matching my own. For once, we weren't heir and assistant. We weren't master and servant. We were two men caught in a storm, tearing each other open piece by piece. When the chaos finally stilled, we stood locked in place, foreheads nearly touching, both of us breathing hard. His tie was loose in my fist, his eyes blazing with something I'd never seen before, something terrifying in its intensity. "You drive me insane," he said hoarsely. "Good," I shot back, my voice raw. Because you're not the only one losing control. His smirk returned then, but it was different. Not cold. Not cruel. It trembled at the corners, hiding something vulnerable. Fear, maybe, or relief. You don't understand, he whispered. I've never needed anyone like this before. The words hit me harder than I expected. For a man like Yoonha to admit need at all, it was unthinkable. And yet, here he was, standing in front of me, the cold air stripped bare in a way no one else would ever see. Something shifted inside me. All this time, I thought he was trying to break me. But maybe he'd been breaking himself too. From that night on, everything changed. The dangerous game of power and control didn't disappear, but it transformed. His obsession didn't vanish, it deepened, twining with mine until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. He still smirked at me, still whispered sharp commands, still tested my limits. But now, beneath it, I saw the truth, the vulnerability he hid, the loneliness he carried. And every time I met him head-on, every time I refused to bend or chose to stay, I saw something soften in his eyes. Devotion. That's what it was. Obsession laced with devotion. One evening, weeks later, I caught my reflection in the mirror of his study. I barely recognized myself, the scholarship student who once thought this job was just a paycheck. My life had twisted into something dangerous, intoxicating, consuming. Yoonha walked up behind me, his reflection appearing beside mine. He met my eyes in the mirror, his smirk curling faintly on his lips. But this time, it wasn't a weapon. It was a shield for the vulnerability beneath. You're not just my assistant anymore, he said softly. I turned to face him, heart pounding. I know. Because the truth was undeniable now. I was the only one who could bring the cold air to his knees. And he was the only one I wanted to destroy me completely.